Detectives have been searching for a blue tennis bag that went missing from the McCann's holiday apartment. The bag belonged to Jerry McCann. He'd been playing tennis in the hours before his daughter vanished.
If it's a bag of a size that could be taken away from the flat, a child, that would be of great interest to the investigating officer.
The cadaver dog freezes, its body suddenly rigid, alert. Then comes the bark, sharp, insistent, unmistakable. Keeler, one of the world's most respected cadaver detection dogs, has caught the scent of death. Not just anywhere, but inside a vacation apartment's built-in wardrobe. The handler watches as the dog's behavior intensifies, focusing with laser precision on a blue Kappa tennis bag hanging inside. 7 days earlier, a 3-year-old girl had vanished from this very room without a trace. Now, this tennis bag is telling a story that would send shockwaves through the investigation before mysteriously disappearing itself. Before we dive deeper into this chilling mystery, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to join our criminal instinct community. You don't want to miss a single detail of the cases we uncover. On the evening of May 3, 2007, what began as a peaceful family vacation in Portugal's picturesque Algarve region transformed into one of the most baffling disappearances in modern history. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, while her parents dined with friends at a nearby tapas restaurant. The sliding glass door was found unlocked, the bedroom window potentially tampered with, and most importantly, Madeleine was gone. The case exploded into international headlines. Portuguese police, British investigators, volunteers and media descended on the small coastal town. Search parties combed the beaches, vacant buildings and surrounding countryside. Madeleine's parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, both medical doctors, launched a global awareness campaign that would keep their daughter's face on newspapers and television screens for years to come. But beneath the public search, a more disturbing narrative was taking shape in apartment 5A, one that centered around a seemingly ordinary piece of luggage. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below. This case touched people worldwide, and I'm always fascinated to see how far Madeleine's story has reached. Within hours of Madeleine's disappearance, forensic officers photographed every inch of the apartment. Among the items documented was a blue Kappa tennis bag, hanging innocuously on a hook inside a built-in wardrobe in the children's bedroom. At first glance, nothing about this bag raised suspicions. It appeared to be just another vacation item, perhaps belonging to one of the parents. But 7 days later, everything changed. 2 specialized cadaver dogs, Keeler and Eddie, were brought to apartment 5A. These weren't ordinary police dogs. They were specifically trained to detect the scent of human decomposition, cadaverine, a compound released during the early stages of a body's breakdown after death. Their accuracy rate in controlled tests approached near-perfect levels. When these dogs entered the apartment, their behavior transformed dramatically. Eddie alerted strongly to the wardrobe area. Keeler's reaction was even more specific, directly indicating the blue Kappa tennis bag itself. Under Portugal's warm May temperatures, which regularly exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit, human decomposition becomes detectable within 48 to 72 hours. The dog's alerts suggested something profoundly disturbing, that human remains had been in contact with both the wardrobe and the tennis bag. What makes this evidence particularly chilling isn't just what the dogs found, it's what happened next. When investigators later attempted to locate the blue Kappa bag to perform more thorough forensic testing, they made a shocking discovery. Despite being clearly photographed during the initial evidence sweep, the tennis bag had vanished. It was never logged into evidence, it never reached the forensic lab. It simply disappeared. How does a key piece of evidence, one potentially linked to a missing child, simply vanish from one of the most high-profile investigations in European history? And what might that tennis bag have contained that triggered such strong reactions from dogs trained to detect human remains? The answers may lie in a controversial theory that would shake the foundation of everything we thought we knew about Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Praia da Luz sits like a postcard on Portugal's southern coast, a small, tranquil fishing village transformed into a tourist haven. Whitewashed buildings with terracotta roofs cascade down gentle slopes toward a crescent-shaped beach. The Atlantic Ocean stretches endlessly beyond, its waters shifting between deep azure and turquoise depending on the light. In May 2007, the summer season was just beginning. Temperatures hovered in the comfortable mid-70s, and the resort town was filling with European families seeking early sunshine before the peak tourist crowds arrived. The Ocean Club Resort, where the McCanns stayed, wasn't a traditional hotel, but a collection of apartments and villas spread across several blocks. Apartment 5A sat on the ground floor at the corner of a whitewashed two-story building on Rua Dr. Agostinho da Silva. It featured 2 bedrooms, a living area with a kitchenette, and sliding glass patio doors that opened onto a small terrace overlooking both the resort's swimming pool and a public street. This corner location meant the apartment was accessible from multiple sides, a detail that would later become critically important. Kate and Jerry McCann arrived at the Ocean Club on April 28th with their 3 children, Madeleine, nearly 4, and 2-year-old twins, Sean and Amelie. They traveled with 7 friends, 3 other couples, and a single woman, a group that British tabloids would later dub the Tapas Nine. All were professionals in their 30s and 40s. Many were doctors like the McCanns. They'd planned this vacation together, booking adjacent apartments and villas within the resort. The first 5 days passed uneventfully. The adults took turns using the resort's childcare services, played tennis, and enjoyed the pool. Each evening, they gathered at the resort's tapas restaurant while their children slept in nearby apartments. The restaurant sat approximately 50 yards from apartment 5A, close enough that the adults felt comfortable checking on their sleeping children periodically throughout dinner. May 3rd began like any other vacation day. Madeleine attended the resort's kids' club, went sailing with her father, and played by the pool. The family returned to apartment 5A around 6 p.m. Kate bathed the children while Jerry played tennis. By 7 p.m., all 3 children were in bed, the twins in travel cots in the same room as Madeleine, who slept in a single bed under the window. At 8:30 p.m., with the children asleep, Kate and Jerry left the apartment to join their friends at the tapas restaurant. They didn't engage a babysitter. Instead, the group had established a rotation system where one adult would check on all the children approximately every half hour. The McCanns left their apartment unlocked to facilitate these checks, though the patio door was secured with a child-proof gate. Jerry made the first check at 9:05 p.m., noting that all 3 children were sleeping soundly. At 9:15 p.m., another member of the group, Jane Tanner, passed by the apartment and later claimed she saw a man carrying a child in pajamas walking away from the resort, though she didn't realize the significance of this sighting until later. At 9:30 p.m., another friend checked, but only listened at the apartment door without entering. At approximately 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann went to check on her children. When she opened the bedroom door, she felt a draft. The window was open wider than they had left it. In the dim light, she noticed Madeleine's bed was empty. After searching the apartment, Kate ran back to the restaurant in panic, famously crying, "They've taken her." What followed was chaos. Resort staff organized an immediate search of the grounds and nearby beach. Guests and staff formed search parties, calling Madeleine's name into the darkness. The Portuguese Polícia Judiciária, PJ, was contacted at 10:41 p.m., but the first officers didn't arrive until 11 p.m. By midnight, a more formal search operation was underway, though critics would later point out that crucial early hours were lost in disorganization. The Portuguese police made several critical errors in those first hours. They failed to secure the crime scene properly, allowing dozens of people to walk through apartment 5A, contaminating potential evidence. They didn't alert border control until the following morning, giving any potential abductor ample time to leave the country. They didn't conduct comprehensive door-to-door interviews until days later. Perhaps most damaging, they didn't request surveillance footage from nearby businesses until much of it had been overwritten. The first formal examination of apartment 5A didn't occur until the following day, May 4th. Forensic technicians dusted for fingerprints, photographed the rooms, and collected bedding for analysis. It was during this initial evidence collection that the blue Kappa tennis bag was photographed hanging in the wardrobe. an innocuous detail that would become significant only later. By the time British police liaison officers arrived on May 7th, the apartment had been released back to the resort and cleaned. The McCanns had moved to alternative accommodation, and the initial forensic sweep was complete. What nobody realized then was that crucial evidence may have already been compromised, or in the case of the tennis bag, disappeared entirely. As the investigation progressed, Portuguese authorities faced mounting pressure. The case had exploded in international media, with British tabloids sending dozens of reporters to the small town. The McCanns launched a global awareness campaign, even meeting with the Pope. Amid this intense scrutiny, investigators began exploring a theory that would dramatically shift the direction of their inquiry. One centered around what might have been inside that blue tennis bag. The first photographs of apartment 5A were taken on May 4th, less than 24 hours after Madeleine's disappearance. Portuguese forensic technicians methodically documented each room, creating a visual inventory of the scene. Among these images was a seemingly unremarkable photograph of the children's bedroom closet. Hanging on a hook inside this built-in wardrobe was a blue Kappa tennis bag. The bag appears in multiple evidence photographs, clearly visible from different angles. It's a standard sports duffel, royal blue with white Kappa branding and shoulder strap. In the images, the bag appears to be partially filled but not bulging, hanging approximately 5 feet from the floor inside the wardrobe. Nothing about its appearance immediately suggested relevance to the investigation. It was simply documented as part of the standard crime scene photography protocol. Initial reports didn't mention the bag specifically. The first evidence logs focused on bedding, window mechanics, and fingerprints from the apartment. The tennis bag was photographed but not collected during this initial sweep, a decision that would later raise serious questions about evidence handling procedures. For the first week of the investigation, attention centered on conventional abduction scenarios. Border alerts, witness interviews, and searches of the surrounding area dominated police resources. But on May 10th, 7 days after Madeleine vanished, the investigation took a dramatic turn when British forensic specialists arrived with 2 highly specialized search dogs. Eddie and Keela weren't ordinary police dogs. They were specifically trained cadaver dogs with impressive credentials. Eddie, a Springer Spaniel, was trained to alert exclusively to the scent of human cadaverine, a chemical compound released during the decomposition process. Keela, a blood detection dog, was trained to identify human blood, even in microscopic amounts or after cleaning attempts. Together, they represented the cutting edge of forensic canine detection, having successfully worked dozens of high-profile cases in the UK. To understand the significance of what happened next, we need to understand how human decomposition works. When a person dies, the body immediately begins breaking down. Within 24 to 48 hours, bacteria in the gut begin producing volatile organic compounds, primarily cadaverine and putrescine. These compounds have distinct, powerful odors that trained dogs can detect in concentrations as low as 1 part per trillion. That's equivalent to detecting a single drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. In Portugal's warm May climate, with temperatures regularly reaching the high 70s, decomposition accelerates. Typically, cadaverine becomes detectable to specialized dogs within 90 minutes after death and remains present for weeks afterward, even if a body is moved. The compounds bind to porous surfaces like fabric, wood, and carpet, creating what forensic experts call scent reservoirs that can persist long after the source is removed. When Eddie entered apartment 5A, his behavior changed immediately upon reaching the children's bedroom. Video footage from the search shows the dog alerting strongly to the area around the wardrobe, the same wardrobe where the blue Kappa tennis bag had been photographed a week earlier. Eddie's alert was what handlers call a final indication, sitting down and barking, the strongest possible signal in his training protocol. Keela, the blood detection dog, was then brought in separately. She also alerted to the wardrobe area, though more specifically to the lower portion of the wardrobe interior. The handlers, working blind, meaning they weren't told about the case details to prevent unconscious cueing, reported that both dogs' alerts were among the strongest they'd witnessed in their careers. "What time is it where you're watching?" The timeline in this case is crucial. The dog's alerts came exactly 7 days after Madeleine disappeared, a time frame that would become central to the refrigeration theory we'll discuss shortly. When the dog handlers requested to examine items that had been in the wardrobe, investigators made a disturbing discovery. The blue Kappa tennis bag, clearly visible in crime scene photographs from May 4th, was nowhere to be found. It wasn't in the apartment. It wasn't logged in evidence storage. It wasn't with the McCann's possessions that had been moved to their new accommodation. The tennis bag had simply vanished. Portuguese investigators scrambled to locate it. They reviewed evidence logs, questioned forensic technicians, and even searched storage facilities. Court filings from February 2008 confirm that the bag was never officially entered into evidence. Among the 158 items catalogued from apartment 5A, the blue Kappa tennis bag is conspicuously absent. This revelation triggered immediate questions. Who removed the bag? When was it taken? What might it have contained? And perhaps most disturbing, why would someone remove a specific item that cadaver dogs would later alert to? If you're finding this case as disturbing as I am, make sure to like this video so more people can learn about this overlooked evidence. The dog's alerts to the wardrobe and the missing tennis bag created a troubling implication, that human remains had been in contact with both. Under normal circumstances, this would have immediately become the investigation's central focus. But the McCann case was far from normal circumstances. By this point, the case had become an international media sensation. The McCanns had appeared on television across Europe, launched a global awareness campaign, and even met with Pope Benedict XVI. Political pressure was mounting on Portuguese authorities to solve the case quickly. British tabloids were publishing dozens of stories daily, often critical of the Portuguese investigation. In this charged atmosphere, the significance of the missing tennis bag became obscured. Official statements focused on broader search efforts rather than the forensic anomalies within apartment 5A. When Portuguese detective Gonçalo Amaral later attempted to highlight the missing bag in his book, The Truth of the Lie, he was sued by the McCanns and temporarily barred from publishing his account. What makes the tennis bag particularly significant is its portability and purpose. Tennis bags are designed to be insulated, protecting rackets from temperature extremes. This insulation, combined with the bag's size, large enough to contain a small child's body, made it potentially ideal for temporary concealment and transport. Forensic experts consulted by Portuguese authorities noted another disturbing possibility. The strong cadaver alerts, 7 days after Madeleine's disappearance, suggested prolonged contact with human remains, yet no decomposition fluid evidence was found in the apartment. This contradiction pointed to a scenario where decomposition might have been temporarily halted or slowed, a theory that would become central to the investigation's most controversial turn. As investigators grappled with these implications, they began exploring a hypothesis that would challenge everything the public thought they knew about the case: that Madeleine's body might have been temporarily stored in a refrigerated environment, possibly within that missing blue tennis bag, before being moved to a secondary location. Gonçalo Amaral wasn't just any detective on the McCann case. He was the coordinator of the criminal investigation, the Portuguese equivalent of a lead detective. A veteran of the Polícia Judiciária with over 26 years of experience, Amaral had handled numerous high-profile disappearances and homicides. When he proposed what became known as the refrigeration theory, it wasn't mere speculation, but a hypothesis based on forensic inconsistencies that troubled the investigative team. In his controversial book A Verdade da Mentira, The Truth of the Lie, published after he was removed from the case, Amaral outlined his theory in detail. He proposed that Madeleine had died accidentally in apartment 5A, possibly from a fall or medication overdose. Rather than immediately reporting this, Amaral suggested the body was temporarily hidden, then moved when an opportunity arose. The central element of this theory was refrigeration, specifically that Madeleine's body had been kept in a cold environment to delay decomposition. To understand why refrigeration became a focal point, we need to examine decomposition science in Portugal's climate. The Algarve region in May typically experiences temperatures between 65–80 degrees, 18 to 27 degrees. At these temperatures, human decomposition follows a predictable timeline. Within 24 hours of death, bacteria in the intestinal tract begin multiplying rapidly, producing gases and the first detectable traces of cadaverine. By 48 to 72 hours, visible signs of decomposition appear: discoloration of the skin, bloating, and fluid seepage. Most critically for the investigation, the odor compounds become pronounced enough that even untrained humans can detect them. Yet when cadaver dogs alerted in apartment 5A 7 days after Madeleine's disappearance, no visible evidence of decomposition fluid was found. No staining on the floors or walls, no residue in the wardrobe. This presented investigators with a forensic contradiction: strong cadaver odor without corresponding physical evidence of decomposition. Refrigeration offered a potential explanation for this discrepancy. When a body is kept below 40 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius, bacterial growth slows dramatically, delaying the decomposition process. The production of cadaverine continues, but at a significantly reduced rate. If Madeleine's body had been refrigerated shortly after death, then temporarily placed in or near the wardrobe before final removal, it could explain why cadaver dogs detected decomposition odor without visible fluid evidence. The tennis bag fits into this theory in two critical ways. First, its insulated design could have provided temporary cooling if packed with ice or cold packs. Second, its disappearance from evidence aligned with the pattern of potential evidence tampering that troubled Portuguese investigators. Amaral's theory gained traction when investigators discovered that the McCann's rental car, obtained 24 days after Madeleine's disappearance, also triggered alerts from both cadaver dogs. The trunk area, rear door, and key fob all produced positive alerts. This suggested to investigators that decomposition odor had transferred to these surfaces, consistent with a scenario where a body had been moved after initial refrigeration. Critics of the refrigeration theory point to several significant weaknesses. First and most obvious is the lack of physical refrigeration evidence. No refrigerator or freezer large enough to contain a child's body was found in apartment 5A or in any location connected to the McCanns. Hotel staff reported no unusual requests for refrigeration equipment, and no witnesses observed anything being transported to or from refrigeration facilities at the resort. Second, the logistics of refrigeration presented practical challenges. The McCanns were tourists in an unfamiliar location, staying in a small apartment under increasing scrutiny. Access to suitable refrigeration facilities without detection would have been extremely difficult, particularly as media presence intensified in the days following Madeleine's disappearance. Third, forensic experts from the UK challenged the reliability of the cadaver dog evidence. They noted that while highly trained, cadaver dogs can produce false positives when encountering certain cleaning chemicals, rotting food, or even ancient human remains unrelated to the current investigation. Without corroborating physical evidence, dog alerts alone cannot meet the standard for criminal proceedings. The refrigeration theory represents one of many instances where missing evidence has shaped the direction of a high-profile investigation. Throughout criminal history, the disappearance of key evidence has altered case outcomes and fueled conspiracy theories. Consider the case of John Benet Ramsey, where critical evidence from the crime scene, including the original ransom note and pieces of the child's clothing, was handled improperly, contaminating DNA evidence. Or the O.J. Simpson case, where the infamous bloody glove was collected and stored using protocols that defense attorneys successfully challenged as compromising the evidence's integrity. More recently, in the disappearance of Maura Murray, her vehicle's airbag and GPS system mysteriously vanished from police evidence storage, eliminating potentially crucial data about her final movements. In each instance, missing or compromised evidence created investigative blind spots that prevented definitive conclusions. The blue Kappa tennis bag joins this troubling list of vanished evidence. Its absence from chain of custody documentation represents a critical failure in evidence management, whether through deliberate removal or catastrophic oversight. Without the bag, investigators lost the opportunity to test for DNA, fibers, and trace evidence that might have confirmed or refuted the refrigeration theory. Amaral paid a heavy professional price for his hypothesis. In July 2008, he was removed from the case after criticizing British police involvement. His book was temporarily banned in Portugal and the UK following legal action by the McCanns. Yet the questions he raised about the tennis bag and potential refrigeration remain unanswered. As the investigation continued, attention shifted to the rental car obtained by the McCanns weeks after Madeleine's disappearance, a vehicle that would yield its own troubling forensic mysteries and further complicate the already bewildering case. The Portuguese judicial police maintain meticulous evidence protocols. Every item collected from a crime scene receives a unique identifier, detailed description, chain of custody documentation, and secure storage. These procedures ensure evidence integrity throughout an investigation and subsequent legal proceedings. Yet somehow the blue Kappa tennis bag, clearly visible in crime scene photographs, never entered this system. The official evidence inventory from apartment 5A contains 158 distinct items. These range from bedding and clothing to fingerprint samples and trace evidence collected from surfaces. The inventory, filed with the Portuguese prosecutor's office, includes mundane items like children's toys, kitchen utensils, and even a half-empty bottle of sunscreen, but the tennis bag is conspicuously absent. This discrepancy first came to light through careful comparison of the crime scene photographs with the evidence logs. Forensic photographs taken on May 4th clearly show the blue bag hanging in the wardrobe. Yet the corresponding evidence forms, which should document every item visible in these photographs, make no mention of it. This omission might be dismissed as an oversight, if not for two troubling facts: the bag's potential evidentiary value following the cadaver dog alerts and its complete disappearance from all subsequent documentation. In February 2008, the Portuguese investigative journal Publica published a comprehensive analysis of the case evidence. Their reporters gained access to court filings, evidence logs, and forensic reports through judicial sources. Their investigation confirmed what some had suspected. The tennis bag had never been officially collected, logged, or stored as evidence. It had simply vanished between the initial photography of the apartment and the formal cataloguing of evidence. The Publica investigation revealed another disturbing detail. When questioned about the missing bag, forensic technicians who processed the scene claimed they had no recollection of seeing it. This contradicted the photographic evidence and raised questions about whether the bag had been deliberately removed before the formal evidence collection began. What's the weather like where you are? In Portugal's Algarve, the warm temperatures played a crucial role in this case. The region's climate accelerates decomposition, making the absence of visible decomposition evidence in apartment 5A all the more puzzling to investigators. Several theories emerged to explain the bag's disappearance. The first and most innocent suggests simple procedural error, that the bag was moved during the chaotic early hours of the investigation and subsequently forgotten. In the confusion of multiple agencies working the scene, items could have been displaced without malicious intent. A second theory proposes that the bag belonged to another guest and was mistakenly photographed as part of the McCann apartment. Perhaps it was removed by resort staff when they realized the error. This explanation, however, fails to account for why the bag was photographed hanging in the wardrobe rather than being documented as out of place. The third and most troubling theory suggests deliberate removal. Under this scenario, someone recognized the bag's potential evidentiary value and intentionally removed it from the chain of custody. This could have occurred before formal evidence collection began, during the period when the apartment was inadequately secured and accessible to multiple parties. A fourth theory connects to the refrigeration hypothesis, that the bag contained evidence related to temporary storage of remains and was removed specifically to eliminate this evidence. Proponents of this theory point to the timing. The bag disappeared before cadaver dogs were deployed, but after initial photographs documented its presence. The Portuguese judicial police attempted to locate the bag through multiple channels. They interviewed resort staff, questioned the McCanns and their friends, and searched storage facilities where evidence might have been mistakenly placed. These efforts yielded nothing. By the time the case was formally shelved in July 2008, the tennis bag had become one of many unanswered questions in the investigation. What makes the bag's disappearance particularly significant is its timing. It vanished before its potential evidentiary value was established by the cadaver dog alerts, suggesting that if it was deliberately removed, the person responsible anticipated its importance before investigators did. This implies either remarkable foresight or inside knowledge of the investigation's direction. The vanishing tennis bag represents a critical breakdown in evidence management, one that has permanently compromised our ability to resolve certain aspects of the case. Without the bag, forensic scientists cannot test for DNA, fibers, or trace evidence that might confirm or refute theories about its use. We cannot determine what it contained, who handled it, or why it triggered such strong alerts from highly trained cadaver dogs. This case has so many layers. If you want more videos exploring overlooked evidence in famous cases, comment "more evidence" below. The disappearance of key evidence isn't unique to the McCann case, but it represents one of its most troubling aspects. As the investigation progressed, attention shifted from the missing tennis bag to another piece of evidence that would prove equally controversial: the Renault Scenic rental car obtained by the McCanns 24 days after Madeleine's disappearance. This vehicle would yield its own forensic mysteries and further complicate an already bewildering case. What connects these elements, the missing tennis bag and the rental car, is the cadaver dog's response to both. The same dogs that alerted to the wardrobe would later alert to specific areas of the vehicle, creating a forensic link that investigators couldn't ignore, despite the missing physical evidence that might have explained it. On May 27, 2007, exactly 24 days after Madeleine's disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann rented a silver Renault Scenic from a local agency in Praia da Luz. This timeline is critical. More than 3 weeks had passed since their daughter vanished. The initial search had evolved into an ongoing investigation. Media attention remained intense, with photographers following the McCann's movements daily. The rental agreement shows the vehicle was a 2007 model with approximately 3,000 kilometers on its odometer. The McCanns used this car extensively during the following months, traveling to church services, press conferences, and meetings with Portuguese authorities. They also made several longer trips, including visits to Spain and other parts of Portugal as part of their campaign to find Madeleine. On August 6, 2007, over 2 months after Madeleine's disappearance, Portuguese investigators requested that Eddie and Keela, the same cadaver dogs used in apartment 5A, examine the Renault Scenic. The examination took place in an underground parking garage with multiple vehicles present to ensure the handlers remained blind to which car belonged to the McCanns. The results were striking. Eddie, the cadaver detection dog, alerted strongly to the vehicle's trunk area, the rear passenger door, and a key fob associated with the car. Keela, the blood detection dog, indicated the presence of blood in the trunk and on the key fob. Video footage of these searches shows the dog's behavior changing dramatically upon encountering the Scenic, the same distinct alerting behavior they had displayed in apartment 5A. These alerts created an immediate investigative challenge. How could a car rented 24 days after Madeleine's disappearance contain evidence of human decomposition? If Madeleine had died on May 3rd, her body would have been in an advanced state of decomposition by May 27th, making transport extremely difficult without leaving obvious evidence. This timeline contradiction led investigators to consider several possibilities. The first was that Madeleine's body had been initially hidden somewhere else, then moved using the rental car weeks later. The second, connecting to the refrigeration theory, suggested that decomposition had been slowed through refrigeration, making later transport more feasible. A third possibility was that items contaminated with decomposition odor, clothing, or the missing tennis bag, had been transported in the car rather than a body. Following the dog alerts, forensic technicians took multiple samples from the Renault Scenic. They swabbed the trunk carpet, rear door handles, and key fob. These samples were sent to the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham, England, for DNA analysis, a decision that would later prove controversial as some Portuguese officials believed their own laboratories should have conducted the testing. The FSS analysis detected what they termed 15 out of 19 markers, matching Madeleine's DNA profile in samples from the car's trunk. This finding initially seemed significant, but forensic experts quickly noted important limitations. The sample contained a mixture of DNA from multiple individuals. The partial match could not definitively be attributed to Madeleine versus another biological relative. Most importantly, the quantity of DNA was extremely small, classified as low copy number DNA, which is more prone to contamination and misinterpretation. John Lowe, a senior FSS scientist, wrote in his official report, "What we need to consider is that any result we obtain may be due to contamination. Let's look at the question that is being asked. Is there DNA from Madeleine on the swab? It would be very easy to say yes, simply because of the number of components within the result that are also in her reference sample. But we know that there are 37 components in total, rather than the 20 we would expect if the result originated from Madeleine. Therefore, we cannot answer the question, is the match genuine, or is it a chance match?" This nuanced scientific assessment was lost in much of the media reporting, which often presented the DNA evidence as more conclusive than forensic experts considered it to be. The logistical challenges of moving a body using the Renault Scenic were substantial. By late May, Praia da Luz was filled with journalists, many specifically assigned to follow the McCanns. Police surveillance, though not continuous, was regular. The small town's layout meant that unusual nighttime activities would likely be noticed by residents or tourists. Moving a decomposing body under these circumstances would have required extraordinary planning and execution. Critics of the car evidence point to several weaknesses. First, the McCanns had transported their twins and their belongings in the vehicle, potentially transferring Madeleine's DNA through cross-contamination from shared items. Second, the cadaver dog's reliability has been questioned in legal proceedings worldwide, with some studies showing false positive rates as high as 10% in field conditions. Third, the DNA evidence, while suggestive, fell well short of the standard required for criminal proceedings. Supporters of the evidence's significance counter that the specific pattern of alerts to the trunk, rear door, and key fob suggests deliberate transport rather than casual contamination. They note that the dogs alerted only to the McCann's vehicle among multiple cars tested, and that both dogs independently indicated the same areas. The Renault Scenic evidence created a forensic connection between apartment 5A and a vehicle obtained weeks after Madeleine's disappearance. This connection, while circumstantial, shifted the investigation's focus dramatically, leading Portuguese authorities to formally name the McCanns as arguidos, official suspects, in September 2007, a status that would be lifted when the case was archived the following year. The McCann investigation suffered from critical procedural weaknesses from its earliest hours. The failure to properly secure apartment 5A allowed dozens of people, police officers, resort staff, friends, and family, to move freely through the crime scene, contaminating potential evidence. Fingerprints and DNA samples collected days later had limited value because of this initial contamination. Basic protocols like photographing the scene before anything was moved were not consistently followed. Evidence collection and documentation showed alarming inconsistencies. The missing tennis bag represents the most glaring example, but other items were similarly mishandled. Bedding from Madeleine's bed wasn't collected until May 10th, a week after her disappearance. Video surveillance from nearby businesses wasn't requested until much of it had been overwritten. Border alerts weren't issued until the morning after she vanished, allowing ample time for someone to leave Portugal. These procedural failures were compounded by jurisdictional complications between Portuguese and British authorities. Portugal's judicial secrecy laws prohibited investigators from sharing certain information with their British counterparts. Different forensic standards and protocols created conflicts over evidence interpretation, particularly regarding the DNA findings and cadaver dog alerts. Political pressure from both governments further complicated the investigation, with diplomatic tensions occasionally overshadowing forensic considerations. The British involvement, while intended to assist, sometimes created parallel investigations rather than a unified approach. British police liaison officers operated under different legal constraints than their Portuguese counterparts. Forensic samples sent to the UK for analysis were subject to different standards and methodologies than those processed in Portugal. These differences created opportunities for inconsistent conclusions and procedural gaps. Alternative explanations exist for the cadaver dog alerts that don't involve Madeline's death in apartment 5A. Cadaver dogs can alert to blood from living people experiencing certain medical conditions. They sometimes respond to chemicals found in cleaning products, particularly those containing phenol compounds. Ancient remains beneath modern buildings have triggered alerts in other cases, as have certain types of mold and fungal growth. The apartment itself had been occupied by numerous guests before the McCanns arrived. A previous occupant could have experienced a medical emergency involving significant bleeding, explaining Keeler's alerts. The rental car, previously used by unknown customers, could have transported items that left trace decomposition odor unrelated to Madeleine. False positives in cadaver dog work, while rare, are well documented in forensic literature. A 2011 study published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences found that even highly trained cadaver dogs showed an 85 to 95% accuracy rate in controlled conditions, meaning 5 out of 15% of alerts could be incorrect. Without corroborating physical evidence, dog alerts alone cannot definitively establish the presence of human remains. The tennis bag's disappearance might have more mundane explanations than evidence tampering. It could have been moved during the chaotic early response and mistakenly discarded or returned to its owner if it didn't belong to the McCanns. Administrative errors in evidence logging occur even in well-managed investigations, particularly those conducted under intense public scrutiny and time pressure. Yet these alternative explanations struggle to account for the specific pattern of evidence: the dogs alerting to both the apartment and a car rented weeks later, the missing tennis bag that was photographed but never logged, the partial DNA results that, while inconclusive, showed concerning similarities to Madeleine's profile. 16 years after Madeleine McCann vanished, fundamental questions remain unanswered. What happened to the blue Kappa tennis bag? Why did cadaver dogs alert so strongly to both the apartment and a car rented weeks later? How could a 3-year-old child disappear from a holiday resort without anyone seeing anything definitive? Why have thousands of reported sightings across multiple continents yielded nothing conclusive? The case remains officially unsolved. Portuguese authorities formally archived it in July 2008, though it has been reopened for specific investigative actions several times since. British police conducted their own review, Operation Grange, beginning in 2011, which has cost British taxpayers over $11 million without reaching definitive conclusions. This case remains unsolved after all these years. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into overlooked evidence in famous cases. What the tennis bag might have contained, where it went, and what really happened in apartment 5A on May 3, 2007 remain among the most enduring mysteries in modern criminal history. The blue Kappa tennis bag represents more than just missing evidence. It symbolizes the fundamental enigma at the heart of Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Its documented presence in early photographs, the subsequent cadaver dog alerts to its location, and its inexplicable absence from evidence logs create a disturbing sequence that has never been adequately explained. Whether the bag was removed through negligence or intent, its disappearance permanently compromised our ability to resolve crucial questions about what happened in apartment 5A. The McCann case transformed how international investigations are conducted across jurisdictional boundaries. It exposed critical weaknesses in evidence protocols, media management, and cross-border cooperation. Police forces worldwide have implemented new,